Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban, and this is episode 53 of the Lean Blog Podcast for November 19th, 2008. Our guest today is Patrick Anderson, the Executive Director of Chugachmute, which is an organization in Alaska that serves native tribal regions with a number of services, including primary health care. I met Patrick at a Productivity Inc. conference and was really impressed with what Chugachmute was doing with the combination of both Lean and Dr. Deming principles to improve their management system. They've been working with Lean for a number of years, and I hope that you'll enjoy hearing about their story. This is just part one of what will be a two-part discussion, so I hope you'll check back for this and other future podcasts. Well, again, our guest today is Patrick Anderson. Thank you for joining us on the Lean Blog Podcast.
It's wonderful to be able to share our story with you, Mark.
Yeah, and thank you for taking the time to do so. I was wondering if you could start off, you're speaking to us from Alaska. If you could tell us about the Chugachmute organization and who it is that you serve.
I certainly can. We're headquartered in Anchorage, and as I look out my window, it's kind of not very typical October day. Daylight out, but it gets dark fairly quickly, usually around 3:30, 4 o'clock. Temperatures down somewhere around 23, 24, 25, and not much snow on the ground, surprisingly. But Chugachmute is headquartered in Anchorage, but we serve a region of about 10 million acres in size that covers 7 villages throughout south central Alaska. 2 villages are actually in Prince William Sound. That, Mark, as you may know, was the site of the Exxon Valdez grounding and oil spill back in 1989. On the other side, near the Copper River, is our village of Eyak, which is a part of our community of Cordova. Then, of course, Valdez and Seward are on the surrounding coastline of Prince William Sound. And then we have 2 villages in Lower Cook Inlet, kind of at the bottom of the Kenai Peninsula, Port Graham and Nanwalek. So we actually operate clinics in 5 of those communities and support 2 of the other communities with funding.
And so within the organization, what kind of healthcare services do you provide? Pretty much the whole range, or?
Not the whole range. The Indian Health Service, in trying to figure out how to provide health services for very small Alaska Native communities, came up with the idea of the community health aid. There are about 230 small villages that are predominantly Alaska Native in the state. Some of them are very small. Our smallest community has about 55 year-round residents and may grow a little bit in the summertime. But they're also about 25, 30 minutes away by twin-engined airplane from Anchorage. And there are some days where you can't get into that village by any means because of potentially hurricane-force winds for up to 10 days. So each community has practitioners who are trained according to a specific methodology. And in essence, they practice medicine. They don't practice medicine. What they do is they have a manual that they're trained to do patient assessments with, and then they get into electronic communication with a healthcare provider, either a mid-level practitioner, a physician's assistant, or an advanced nurse practitioner, or a physician for the more difficult cases. So Chugachmute's 4 villages are served by community health aides. They're trained in emergency health procedures, and they're actually trained in certain medical procedures and can be authorized by the physician to provide those services without calling in. But most often they serve as the eyes and ears of the physician, and their diagnoses and treatment prescriptions are provided by the mid-level practitioners or the MD. And then we do provide primary care, and we have a physician and 2 mid-level positions in Seward that provide some of that support. If we have more difficult cases, then we rely on the Alaska Native Medical System, the hospital in Anchorage, which is our primary care hospital, and the South Central Foundation's primary care center, which is where a lot of our health aides call doctors. So we are a primary acute care system, but we do have to take patients out of our villages to actually visit with doctors.
Okay. And how is it that you came to start using lean principles in the delivery of health care? I'm curious if you could tell our listeners how that originated.
I certainly can, and it's a bit of a serendipitous journey. I spent a number of years teaching at the University of Alaska Southeast, which is located in Juneau, Alaska. And 2 of the courses that I taught, even though I'm a law science faculty member down there back at that time, were an Introduction to Business course and an International Business course. And during that period of time, I became quite familiar with the principles that Dr. W. Edwards Deming formulated. And in fact, had an opportunity to visit a high school in Sitka that had implemented a curriculum based on some of Dr. Deming's principles. When I left the university in 1991, I filed some of that information away as I practiced law for a period of time, and then when I came to Chugachmute, I was all of a sudden managing an organization with about $10.5 million in funding and about 60 employees. And I have to confess, based on my past business experience, it was not a well-run organization. I had served at that point in time for about 15 years as a board member for Sealaska Corporation, which is a native corporation for Southeast Alaska that I'm a shareholder of. And in that service, I sat on the board of a partnership that Sealaska had with a company called Nipro Precision Plastics. In May of the first full year I was serving as executive director of Chugachmute, I was attending a board meeting of Nipro and Sealaska's plastics plants in Clinton, Massachusetts, and the president of that company, Brian Jones, happened to come in and have lunch with 3 of us. For about 30 minutes, he was explaining to us Nipro's high velocity system and how it enabled Nipro to compete in a post-NAFTA environment, the North American Free Trade Agreement, when a lot of plastics molding was going offshore. Well, it turned out that the high velocity system was based on the Toyota production system, and as Brian was explaining it to us, and as I had seen in the plastics plants that Nipro managed for us, there were huge gains. I mean, monumental gains in productivity. These weren't just incremental small gains. They were huge, and it did enable our plants to survive. So that made me curious, which I followed up with a trip to the Shingo Prize in Lexington, Kentucky that year. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. But that's how we became aware of the Toyota production system and the lean methodologies.
Yeah, and what was the timeline on that again?
That was in May of 2004.
Okay.
I met a couple of lean administration consultants. We don't have any manufacturing, and I really wasn't aware of the lean healthcare movement, although I subsequently did become much more aware of it. But I came back to Anchorage very excited. We did schedule a consultant to come in and do one training, and I had my staff do some distance delivery education, and we began our path of trying to understand what the lean methodologies were all about, and actually scheduled our first Kaizen event for one of our clinics in Port Graham. And although it was a typical maiden effort at a Kaizen, it did give us a huge amount of insight into management of a village-based clinic. The insights that we actually had were, number one, that most of the time your employees don't communicate with management. As a consequence, there are huge problems typically with providing tools to the employees that allow them to do their work. And most employees don't want to rock the boat. They're fearful about management meddling in the comfortable circumstances that they've usually set up in their workplace. We really didn't get much traction until we engaged a lean sensei, Dr. Tom Jackson, to come up and teach us in a number of Kaizen. We budgeted for, and I'm real happy to say my board agreed to budget a pretty substantial amount to conduct at least 6 week-long Kaizen during that next fiscal year, which started October 1 of 2004 and ended September 30 of 2005. That's when our learning really accelerated, and my role as a leader began to change gradually, and that change is continuing to this day. It's amazing how, if you truly embrace the lean methodologies, the role of leadership just transforms into something completely different from what you ever imagined it to be.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, what are a couple examples of that change in management approach, either things that you do differently or encourage other leaders in the organization to do differently?
Well, here's one illustration that I believe captures the change, and it only happened recently. This is the first year that we have knowingly and accurately engaged in the process of Hoshin Kanri strategy deployment throughout the organization. And in the process, as we were taught, we have A3Ts that I'm obligated to prepare, and in my A3T, I state what I believe the problem that I want to be addressed is. The problem statement is pretty familiar to lean practitioners. And then I give some guidance to my executive staff by stating a target statement, what I want to see in terms of achievement. And we're taught that the target statement needs to be numerical, that we want an X% improvement in a certain part of our business. We want to reduce the amount of time it takes us to do this particular process by X%. And I carried that out by beginning to define some of the solutions that I thought would address the target statement. And as I sat down in the first round of catchball with my 5-member executive team, we were about 30 minutes into the conversation, and one of my division directors spoke up and said, Patrick, you aren't supposed to be telling us the solutions. You are supposed to be setting the target, and then we will work on the solutions based on our catchball with our staff and looking at our resources. You really should leave the research and devising the solution to us. And I had to say, Mark, that it made a lot of sense that I hired these people or kept them on when I got here because of their intelligence. And if anything, when I set the target, my role should then be in utilizing my research skills developed as a faculty member and as an attorney to mentor them in how to come up with the problem solutions. That's the big transformation. I am no longer holding hands. I'm setting goals. I'm setting targets. I am coaching. I'm mentoring. I am able to fulfill my roles as a strategic leader for the organization. In other words, I'm not so preoccupied with the day-to-day management. I am able to try and extend my view, my vision, my reach to 10, 15, 20 years out the road and try to help guide an organization into a structure that will meet those goals 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And then the leadership role of interacting with patients, with clients, with customers, with stakeholders, with board members, and with partners now becomes a more significant part of my role. So it has been a huge transformation. I'm building a team of 5 leaders who I hope I can extend into strategic leadership, into governance leadership, and into interactive leadership with the people that we serve.
And the story you told me, that's absolutely a great example of what we're taught about lean leadership. And I'm curious also if you were able to dust off some of what you had learned or practiced before with Dr. Deming's philosophy, because I think we have a lot of listeners who, like myself, have a similar background and appreciate the complementary nature of the Deming approach and lean. So I was wondering if you have any examples of that you could share as well.
Oh, absolutely. Chugachmute no longer does individual employee performance evaluations, and my board agreed to remove that from our personnel policy. And that's specifically because, as I've explained to my staff, we want to work in terms of systems and processes, not in terms of individual interactions with those systems and processes, except through the whole concept of standard work. And what we've tried to implement and are still in the process of implementing is an organization-wide value map that focuses around the client, around the patient, and around the customer and their journey through us, and then looking at all of the supportive functions that we have. The term that I keep hearing most often is elimination of functional silos. We try to show every employee that they are integral to every service that we provide to every customer or client or patient that we serve. So we have a language and culture program, for example, and people may say, well, how does that fit into healthcare? Well, it fits into healthcare because we've been able to adopt a holistic approach to healthcare where we don't just react to the condition that the patient brings to our healthcare providers. We're beginning to understand that looking to the behavioral health of the patient is critical to how they deal with their physical health, and language and culture services are a component of that. So, Dr. Deming talked about the team. He talked about how you don't individually exhort people to do better. Instead, you improve the systems and you define the role of each of our people within those systems and how they interact with all of their coworkers to provide the best possible and highest quality service they can. So we know that if we can convince our employees that they're a part of a process and the process needs to be improved and they need to be a part of that improvement, we get much better results. We have implemented this by a couple of things that I learned in my first 6 months of being the executive director at Chugachmute. The first was that there is no blame in a lean organization. And our leaders are not supposed to use the concept of shame to encourage behavioral change. So we immediately began talking about Chugachmute being a no blame, no shame environment. Then we realized that even though we're no blame and no shame, we have to understand the facts. and we can't be judgmental about the facts. We can't accept the first little snippet of fact that comes in and say, oh, this must have happened. We really need to be scientific about it. So what all of a sudden comes up as we begin to go into a no blame, no shame, fact-based and non-judgmental environment is process improvement, development of standard work, and then the whole concept of training our people. Mm-hmm. Because if they don't know, I mean, already I've discussed a whole lot of concepts and that our employees need to know and understand, but even more so that they need to begin adapting to through behavioral changes in their own life and in their own reaction and responsibilities in the workplace. So I found Dr. Deming's principles applicable throughout. I'm not coming in and telling individuals that you can do better, you know you can do better. Yeah. We're showing them how to do things better, and we're training them. And then we're showing that their performance is dependent on other people's performances, so it's in their best interest to make sure that all of their coworkers perform defect-free work, and when the handoffs of work occur, that there are no defects that cross, and that we have the smallest or shortest possible process. We no longer, for example, have a 144-day new recruitment and hiring process. We average about 32, 33 days. So a lot of the principles for Dr. Deming just fit right in with everything that we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. Now, I'm curious in particular to follow up a little bit on the idea of, you talk about getting rid of individual annual performance reviews, because that's something that I blogged about not long ago. A professor from UCLA wrote a column in the Wall Street Journal making very strongly worded case for getting rid of annual performance reviews, how they're harmful to organizations, it's not the right thing, it's harmful to society. I mean, he really made a very strong case that was reminiscent of Dr. Deming, but it still seems so rare when you find an organization who has taken that leap. And I'm curious, was that a harder sell to the board, or was it a harder sell with the employees? I'm curious how people reacted to the idea of that.
I really didn't see much of a reaction. One of the problems with being the leader in any organization that is non-lean, most employees don't talk to you about their opinions or their problems or the concerns and issues that they have, and they don't reveal to you the complaints that come out of the patient's customers or patients that you might serve. So I didn't hear a lot, and when we implemented that change, it was before I had established my network of sources. Today, I can tell you very quickly when there is an issue or a problem in the organization, because I have a number of people that understand the lean concepts and will reveal problems and issues to me. We're not quite at the same level with our patients and our clients and our customers yet, but I'm confident we're going to get there. But when I proposed it to the board, it didn't take very long for them to accept my recommendation, and I did outline a number of what I thought were good arguments. I used some of the more obvious arguments, the first one being that if the day after the employee's performance review there is an error in the part of the process that employee you just reviewed is involved in, you may not discuss that error with the employee for another 12 months. I explained to the board that the process that we'd like to have in place is, first of all, making sure that when we analyze the process, that we gain all of the quality improvements that we can, and that we shorten the process, and that we establish a training systems and a training to standard work system, so that first of all, I don't think that mistake will be made. Now, Dr. Deming cited 94% of errors and defects occurring in a system coming from process problems as opposed to employee problems. So I adopted that approach, explained it to the board, and they approved it. I really didn't have too many difficulties from existing employees. Made it real clear that what we wanted to do was to be fact-based, non-judgmental, non-blaming, non-shaming, and when we come to you with a defect that occurred in the process, it's not for the purpose of slapping your hands, it's for the purpose of determining your level of knowledge, using that knowledge to analyze that section of the process, improve it, and then figuring out how we can build quality in right at that point, and we want to do it today. As soon as the defect happens, we don't want to wait for another month or two or 12 months before we fix that. So right. Most employees bought into that, at least the ones that I had regular interaction with. Mm-hmm. The other part that they really enjoyed and that my managers enjoyed is that we no longer had to have that one sit-down. I'm not sure how other leaders feel, but you figure if you're going to have a performance evaluation, you should have some performance problems that you document in order to try and show that you're paying attention to your employee, and then to have some sort of corrective plan for those few little problems that you have to, or that you feel obligated to identify. And of course that makes everyone feel uncomfortable. Well, what do you mean I didn't get an A in everything? Well, I thought you had these particular issues. Well, why didn't you talk to me about them when they were happening, and then I could have done something? And everyone walks away unhappy. But when you eliminate performance evaluations and I think as a part of performance evaluations, it just encourages your employees to hide the very process defects that you want to encourage to come out so you can fix them.
Right.
So I just found so many reasons for getting rid of performance evaluations. And the same is true in, if you have an exemplary employee, you don't want to wait 12 months to tell them that they're doing a great job. You want to build it into your system so that not only do you come by and let me take that back. You don't want to identify the defects. You want your staff to. Mm-hmm. But what you want to do is to be able to go up and compliment that staff and just say, you're doing wonderful work. We're asking our employees now to document process improvements. When you see those, you'd like to be able to go down and say, Mary, I think you did a wonderful job in identifying this process defect and reacting to it. It just builds a different way for employees to react and respond to problems, as opposed to wanting to hide it from you so that it doesn't get into their performance review, or to bury it, or to try to fix it on their own without anyone knowing about it. If they feel free to surface those, you're going to fix them a lot faster, and they're not going to have those problems in the future.
Mm-hmm. That's and I think those are great lessons for anyone listening. Not only from healthcare, but I think any organization that's trying to embrace lean. Or
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.